Welcome to the Coaching Collective podcast, episode 15. So today we are in the presence of Ben Cant. So Ben was one of my early mentors and coaches back when I hit the industry, and was one of the main reasons why I actually took the plunge and went full time. Do you remember that
I
from the
do.
Attain workshops? Yeah.
I didn't know at the time my flippant conversation with you would
Mm.
change the trajectory of your life.
Yeah, completely.
So
Yeah, it was, I guess it was a straw that broke the camel's back, actually, because I was sort of like, I'm there, and then you're just giving me the confidence, and I'm like, fuck it, let's go. But
yeah, you,
yeah,
you you told me like after the fact, like I think many
yeah,
years after the fact, and it was like that conversation in the hallway that time, and I was like, oh really?
yeah.
I gotta be very careful with my words. I could have said anything to you.
Could have put me the other way, thank God.
Yeah.
And Ben is an educator and coach from Southeast, we
Yep.
would say, Southeast suburbs of Melbourne. Been around a long time as well, very well known for working, well, we discussed this off air, blood work, sleep, digestion, etc. And yeah, without further ado, man, introduce yourself and take it away.
Yeah. Look. Thanks for having me on, guys. Based in Melbourne. These days, my work is sort of along the lines of online coaching and consulting, some mentoring and teaching as well. I have a background in biochemistry a long time ago. I joke about the fact that I think it was the year 2000 that I enrolled, and it was a degree in biochemistry and psychology, a double degree, and I dropped the psychology, which is quite funny now, considering that most of what I do is behavioral stuff and not biochemistry in coaching. So it would have been nice to just see that out instead of dropping it and majoring in some more chemistry. But yeah, nonetheless, that's kind of where I came from, and it was kind of my personal health issues, I suppose, that drove me away from probably stepping into pharmaceuticals and sort of exploring the nutrition realm, because it was kind of like my understanding changed sort of halfway through my degree, which I was doing pretty poorly at to start with, because I was a country kid who came to the big smoke, the city, and with a few health problems, and I was only doing things to make them worse until I kind of hit like this point of having to do something for myself. And I looked into the world of nutrition to help resolve some of those issues. And then I looked at my textbooks, my biochemistry textbooks, and wondered why. I'm like, why there's like in a complete lack of these nutritional cofactors that are running all these pathways that I'm looking at. Why am I not seeing anything to do with nutrition in here? Why am I learning this without even no comprehension whatsoever of how nutrition and nutrients and vitamins and minerals are so important to make all of these things run? And so that led me down a path of a lot of extracurricular learning outside of the curriculum to focus on that nutritional element, which got me into the health world, the supplement world, and then into coaching and fitness and that.
It's funny you say that, because when I started with biochem, like I remember learning it originally and thinking to myself, this has no purpose in anything that I ever do. And now I look back and it's like, I don't think there's anything that's been more relevant to this day. Yeah. Obviously, it's so complex when you're being taught it that you might just, I guess I just sort of glossed over it to that point. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you obviously started off in the GNC stores, correct? Coming out of study.
Yeah, I worked in a laboratory, a dental laboratory, which we sort of manufactured appliances for dentists. That was really my only role as a biochemist, was for a company here in Victoria, making amalgams and tooth whiteners and things like that. And whilst it was, something that could have led to greater opportunities in the world, in that kind of world, I just, by that stage, I'd already been bitten by the health bug. I wanted to turn my life around. I wanted to get my health in order. And I discovered training. I'd never set foot into a gym up until that point. And so I started training. I started learning about nutrition. It opened my eyes up to the world of supplements. And I just resigned one day. I was like, that's it. I'm going to take the summer off. I got offered a job when I walked into the GNC store, because I started telling them about all their supplements and stuff like that. And they're like, who's this guy? Like, you should get a job here. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? I just quit. I'll just kind of like pick up a shift or two, get some cheap supplements, and it's something that turned into just a complete, again, like, I'll just do this as a bit of a joke. I actually fell in love with, and I fell in love with the fact that I got to meet a whole heap of different professionals. I was very, very fortunate, actually. The GNC supplement store that I stepped into had some incredibly qualified people, like way overqualified people that should have been in practice and not on a retail floor. And that kind of inspired me to understand a bit about what they do. And, that just kind of eventuated into my knowledge base and my network, and kind of like I leveraged off of that to sort of create the businesses that I have today, I suppose.
So you were simultaneously sort of getting into the businesses that you have today while working at the GNC, correct?
Yeah, it kind of evolved from one thing to another. Like I started off as just a casual sales assistant in a supplement store, and then I kind of went to management, to area management, to training and development. So doing like teaching staff that would come to me and to my store and sort of be taught about different things, and then to a estate manager role. So kind of like looking at the business side of things. So I looked after all of Victoria, Queensland, and WA, I think. This is a long time ago. So that was, I can't remember how many stores, maybe 20 to 30 stores with maybe triple that for staff. And that kind of opened up my eyes to a bit more business acumen, because I didn't take any kind of business classes in high school, let alone tertiary education. And then I franchised. So they franchised here in Australia. I went into that world and learned some pretty brutal lessons in my lack of business acumen at a time around the global financial crisis and the the real flourishing of online supplement stores and things like that. We learned things the hard way, and through a lot of that hardship, that kind of evolved into just looking at what my opportunities were and seeing the digital space was kind of getting bigger, and the online, I'd already been online coaching whilst in store to a few clients anyway. And after we got out of the supplements, it just made logical sense to kind of like expand upon that.
So obviously you got into the online coaching a little bit later in life, I guess, than what most do as well. You would have been in your late 20s.
Yes, at least.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's cool. And you obviously, I just remember you telling me this back in the day as well. You got into bodybuilding a bit later as well, like true bodybuilding, because I didn't think you competed until you were in your 30s.
Yeah, it was 2014 was my first shows, and I would have been 34.
Yeah, because I remember you used to always tell me, you're so young, man. I used to think, fuck, I'm not that young. I'm getting older now. And now, like, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah. I was very late to it. Like I probably started training when I was 23, 24, and it was sort of on off. And then I did CrossFit for a while. I would have liked to take CrossFit further than I did. I started CrossFit like 3 or 4 months before they had their opens, and I think I came 100th in Australia. After doing it for about 3 months. Yeah. And the guys at the box I was at were like, mate, you've got to take this further. Like top 60 would have taken you to regionals. You come in like a couple of sessions a week. And I wasn't taking it seriously, but then I thought, actually, maybe I've got something here. Like I've got a little bit of talent and a little bit of skills, I suppose, that I've gotten through training over the years. But as it would happen, I trained hard at it for a year, and I blew my shoulder right after coming back from a trip to South America, and right before the next opens, and I just never took it further after that. And the next thing that happened, I sort of fell into bodybuilding, decided 4 weeks out from a competition that I was going to compete. We all know what kind of decision-making that was. So yeah, I did a 4-week prep and won the Victoria novices.
Oh, you actually won?
Yeah, I won.
What show was that?
It was the NABA novice in 2014. Yeah. So I won that. And then the next week was the Australias in Tokyo, and I won that. And I met Eugene Teo actually backstage. So he was competing in the Class D, the shorts, and I was competing in the novices. He won that. I won the novices. And then I was eligible for the WFF Worlds, I think 3 weeks later. And they were in Queensland. Yeah. So I went and competed in that. Graham Lansfield, who was the head of the federation, said to me that I had to be in the under 80s. Yeah. Which was pretty hard because I dieted down to 86 kilos for the Australias a couple of weeks earlier, and I just didn't know how I was going to make under 80s. So I did some very, very drastic stuff that you would try never to do to a client to hit that under 80. Only to find out that I could have done the under 85s. Graham, I just didn't know any better. Right? Graham already had someone in the under 85s. Brendan, who's a champion guy actually, but he wanted someone in the under 80s, and so I took that spot. But I killed myself getting under 80.
So you got there. Okay.
I got there. I got third. And yeah, so it was a good first year of bodybuilding for me. And,
Mhm.
I competed for a couple of years after that as well.
Yeah, because WFF is not as popular anymore, is it?
I don't really know how popular it was even to start with, to be honest
Yeah,
with you.
maybe not.
So
Yeah, I just wasn't sure
uh,
because I just assumed if you had to qualify for it, maybe. But
when
yeah,
people ask me why I did NABA over IFBB, it was because my decision to compete was either 3 weeks out from the IFBB or 4 weeks out from NABA. And I went down to my good mate, Sean, and I said, bro, I'm going to compete. What do you think? And I stripped down at his house and he looked at me and he went, you have to do NABA. We
yeah,
need an extra week. and so that's why I did NABA when people ask. And because I won, like I went in, I won. I think if I hadn't have gone too well, I probably would have done IFBB straight away. But I ended up on some posters the next year, and I was like, oh, my path was kind of already set to compete in NABA, right? So I stayed there for a couple of years.
No, cool. Yeah, so obviously we worked together. Well, we were together for like 2 years, yeah. And we did the I did the Attain with you as well. Well, indirectly through you, yeah.
I feel like you were one of my COVID clients, weren't you?
Yeah, I was. Yeah. Yeah. So
Yes.
that was
All the fun and games of like working out home equipment and new schedules, and
yeah,
those
because I remember,
wonderful COVID times.
yeah, the habit development was a big one that we sort of focused on because in COVID that was just rat shit. Yeah. To be fair, I actually didn't mind the lockdowns too much as other people didn't. When you come out of it, it's sort of like, fuck, that was pretty shit. But at the time, I could still train, I could still work.
Well, from memory, it was a big motivating factor for you as well to look at the business model that you had and looking at where it needed to go. And so I think like a lot of our discussions, aside from just regular coaching stuff, was looking at where you were going to take this.
Yeah, it was definitely. Because yeah, obviously, like I mentioned just before when we were chatting, how I've sort of moved the business again now. But without those discussions and lockdown, I don't think I would have even had those fundamentals in place to move to where I am today. It just wouldn't have happened. Which is, yeah, so you got to sort of, it's a little bit of a blessing in itself. But yeah, one of the things, well, just a little bit about your methodologies as well. Like it was a very balanced approach to coaching. So we never really just focused on, all right, while obviously everything's results driven, but it wasn't like we just looked at the nutrition training supplement intricacies in order to get to where we were headed. And we sort of you recognized as a coach that you really need to focus on your routine, obviously these are a little bit simpler, but sleep, digestion, etc., mental health and whatnot, which I've worked with a few coaches now and I've never had that kind of approach to my processes. And I guess it just attributes to becoming a better human being overall. Did you want to, I know I touched on a little bit there, but is there anything could you expand on that and what you sort of stand for through your practice and education, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as I sort of alluded to at the start there, the type of client that often comes to me is because of like some of the biochemistry stuff that I might put up on, on social media or something like that. Like maybe it's something like I am biased to, I find nutritional biochemistry, fascinating. I think there's some really relevant educational components to it that can really be part of helping people create the best nutrition setups for themselves, for their health and their goals, right? But whilst I love that, I don't ever, think it should be like the most complicated part of like working with a client. That shouldn't be their experience just because I like to look at blood work and look at things on that nuanced angle and end. For me, like the lowest hanging fruit a lot of the time is like looking at those behavioral changes that need to be had, or even the mindset changes, and looking at, the expectations that the people have, even just the organization, like we were talking about off camera before. Yeah. Like for me, every bit of an interaction is kind of showing you like what someone's organization looks like. Okay. From the moment you get a message or a DM or an inquiry, through to like getting that initial data with health forms, through to whatever you have as that process that is onboarding. It's kind of showcasing someone's ability to, create time for themselves and do what they say they're going to do. And so, I'm always looking for opportunities to go, look, if I'm suspect that, part of what's going to become obstacles here is, your lack of organization and, your poor task management or time management, then I think that we deal with that first. Because, I'm someone who over the years, I got into this habit of saying, look, when you know better, you do better. And as an educator, that's what you're selling. You're selling knowledge. Right?
Yeah.
But then that is all felt well and fine for people who are going to be able to implement that knowledge, without any barriers to doing so. But there are so many people, as you and I both know, that have many, many barriers. They know better, but they just don't do better. They know how to eat healthy, but they don't eat healthy. And that's kind of like the part of coaching that I had to, really look at many, many years ago and go, oh, okay, you can't just teach people what to do. It's about like, how do you get someone actually doing those things? And so just ensuring that they've got, the right setup for themselves. They're looking at their environment. They understand. I leverage off a lot of experts. I'm just going to say I steal stuff all the time. There's so many people that say everything that I say better than me. I'm just parroting, the words of the many greats that have put out some amazing resources for us. We're definitely not in a time of too little information. What we're in a time of is like, how do you find a mentor who can curate that information for you in a way that basically means you get from point A to point B in the quickest, most efficient way possible. So that journey for myself with a client often looks along the lines of identifying these areas. I'm like, oh, okay, you need organizational skills. Cool. Let me show you like a model that I use that involves, a calendar, a task manager, sort of mastering your environment so you're aware of certain notifications and you're removing distractions and you're allowing time for focus and things like that, so that you say you're going to do it. I'll leverage off of James Clear's Atomic Habits book. Like, it's mandatory reading, basically, if you want to come and work with me.
That is mandatory reading for me as well. You taught me that one. Yeah.
It's mandatory reading. I'm just like, go and read it. I have a particular way that I like to do things, because I think this is sometimes the conversation that I'll get asked a lot is, how do you learn? And I'll sort of say, oh, that's a good question. It's also, I think, like, how do I teach? And a lot of the time I found that in this day and age, telling someone to read a book, like, a lot of people aren't book readers, especially in an age of like short attention spans, and getting someone to go through a proper 200, 300, 400-page book is like, they haven't done that in years. And so for myself, I find like, if I was to give you a 10-minute video of James Clear talking about habits, or from a TEDx talk, right? You can engage with that. It's the highlights reel of his work anyway. You get to know him by sight and his mannerisms, the way he articulates, and then it's like, oh, wow, you got instant buy-in from that. Cool, let's go to the next step and get the book or listen to the audio book, and then kind of like get more of that resource, more of that person and their teachings. And so that's often, one of the ways in which I'll expose people to different things. About like, look, the most important thing for you might be the organization. Then I need to be looking at the habits. And then maybe there's, a lot of critical self-talk that they have, and, this judgment stuff that's, stopping them from doing what they say they're going to do. And it's like, okay, I need you to understand about willpower and self-control. Like, what are the contributing factors towards you being able to do what you say you're going to do, and why it's different than relying upon motivation. Okay, so kind of like making these distinctions with people so that they can set themselves up to going, oh, well, one of the biggest contributing factors to your self-control is going to be good sleep and stress management and physical exercise and great nutrition. Does that sound like the 4 pillars that we came here to do anyway? And so it's kind of like building value into the things that every coach on the planet knows is important, is trying to get their clients to just go, it's important too. Like, let's get this happening.
Yeah. And it's the best part about the way that you approach that is the way, that we especially work through was establishing and identifying the barriers which prevent us from essentially getting these concepts into place and finding a way to integrate. That's obviously the Atomic Habits help significantly with that. But before I was coached by you, like I'd never thought that was even a part of coaching. It was like, give them a nutrition plan, a diet plan, a supplement plan, on you go, check in next week. I'll tell you what to do next.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's like, part of that process for me that sort of ties it all in is just having an analytic process to it. Okay. And so I tend to not use words like that. I'll call it like our weekly reflection. Okay? Yeah. And, in a weekly reflection, I'll often get a client to say, look, what didn't go your way? We might do some gratitude stuff first and foremost. It's like what went well, like, let's get specific with, some of the things what were our wins for the week. But in terms of the obstacles, like you mentioned, it might be like, well, what didn't go our way this week? Why didn't it go your way? And this is the next bit. You need to go root cause on this. Like, so you can say, oh, I didn't have my meals. It's like, well, why didn't you have your meals? And you ask why 3 or 4 times in a row, and then you get to your answer.
Yeah.
And that answer is often one of very few things: organization, motivation, sleep, stress. You get to it, and then it's like, to finish off the what, why, it's like, well, how are you going to address this? I want to know something with specificity, and specificity is really important with me. And I think James talks about it very well in his Atomic Habits book when he says implementation intentions. And the example he uses is scientists do a study where they're looking at getting participants to exercise. And there's 3 groups that they divide them up into. Group 1, they give them a training program and say, go and train, guys. Group 2, they give them a training program and they rev them up with an hour's worth of motivational speaking or videos or something like that. Maybe they get them to scroll Instagram and, go through some gym memes or whatever. And then group 3, they say, listen, here's a training program, and we want you to write specifically the time, date, and location of where you're going to train. Okay. And so in having to go that extra step and get specific and get it out of your head onto paper with a commitment and implementation intention with those specific parameters, time, place, location, there were some very interesting results that came from that. Group 1, who got given the training program, told to train, about 30% of them trained. Group 2, that got the training program with the motivation, about 30% of them trained. Group 3, who did the implementation intention, it was a triple. It was 90%. Okay, so it was staggeringly different. And this is one of the things where I'll say, look, I don't want a weekly reflection by you where, and we've all done this as coaches, right? You got to remember, you go back and hopefully it wasn't last week, but you go back and you go, hey, yeah, we didn't have a great week this week. What are we going to do for next week? And the client goes, I'm going to eat healthier. And you're like, that's great. It's like, what the fuck does eat healthier mean? What does that mean? Like, what are you going to do? There is no skin in the game in that statement, right? And so what happens then the next week? Oh, I didn't eat healthier, but I'll try again next week as well, because there was zero specificity to what we were saying. There was no skin in the game with an actual commitment on the line then. And so I'll call that with a client. I go, I don't want to use fluffy language. I don't need you to overcommit either. It's not this, we're not going for this all or nothing, unrealistic set of expectations about what you can do in your best week. I want to know what you can do on your worst week. You know what I mean? And that's kind of our non-negotiables. Those are our minimum standards that we're going to hold ourselves to. But this weekly reflection I want to be able to do is, you come out of the what went wrong? Why did it go wrong? And how are you going to take action on this? And then the final thing is, I want the action to be soon. Speed of implementation is really important. We are living in a world where there's so much information, and if I had a chance to coach someone who's a practical applier of things that just needs guidance versus someone who's a thinker, and I can't motivate them to actually take action on anything, I will take the person who just does stuff and gets things wrong and guide them through that process, because it's so much harder to take someone who's going to analyze everything to death without actually putting an action plan in place. And so this speed of implementation, I go, it's just about getting that going. And that for me kind of makes a successful loop, to like looking at what our goals are, having some metrics that we measure, having an analysis or a review process, which helps you then and governs some of the decision making and highlights the obstacles, so that you can go away with a plan for next week and implement something straight away, so that you're setting yourself up for success.
I'm glad you actually gone right into depth on that too, because I bring up these kind of concepts with clients, and I'm sure you do the same. Obviously, you're a little bit more vocal about it, so people know that you're going to have these conversations with them. But you ask these kind of questions. The way you put it before, what can you do on your worst week? I like that. You sort of say, okay, we'll make this. How can we make this work within your worst week? I wouldn't have phrased it like that, but and
I definitely stole that from someone, by the way.
It doesn't sound super unique. It's just
I've said nothing new today that hasn't been said.
Just such an easy way to put it, because it's sort of like I'll say to clients, all right, cool, we just got to work within what you can do. But to say, what can you do on your worst week, so much more straightforward, because you ask, what can you do on your worst week? And they'll actually think, oh, you know what? Do you know what I mean? It gives it a bit more context.
I'll give you an example. So I just started a client this week, and looking at his blood work, and there's a few things going on, and I'm like, listen, I would really love you to get some fatty fish into your diet here. And the client's like, oh, I love fatty fish, go for it. And I'm like, well, what's a feasible amount for you to eat ongoing? Like on your worst week, like what is it? I don't want to know what you can promise me for 1 week.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And then go, oh, coach, I'm sick of fish.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, why did we start with that amount then? You know what I mean? So I'll go, because in my experience, if I need to get a decent amount of omega-3s into someone's diet for whatever reason, it requires a certain amount of fish, and then the rest we will just supplement with a fish oil supplement to fill in the gaps to get us there. But what I would rather have is like just acknowledge the fact that who genuinely likes eating more than 2 portions of fatty fish per week? People say they do.
I do.
But when anyone who's sort of given salmon in someone's diet for an extended period of time comes to realize very quickly with what the person first said, because we're blinking, we're just operating off like a snap answer to a question.
Yeah,
that may not really be as accurate as what we think it is. We think we like healthy things more often than we do a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So if we can get a reasonable number to start with, and that means that, okay, I go into here with a plan that's got a high feasibility of working, and then I've also got an implementation of the supplement to help address that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I will go off topic there. I just took a note down for this too as well. In regards to omega-3 indexes and sourcing, what kind of fish would be your preference? And like if it was salmon, specific sourcing of the salmon. So I know this is something you did a whole podcast on it. So
yeah. So I mean, for omega-3 intake, like I think the acronym we go by is SMASH. So sardines, mackerel, anchovies, salmon, and herring. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Of all of those, salmon is by far and above the most popular for most people because it's not as fishy tasting as the rest.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you can get yourself some Atlantic wild salmon, that's a really good choice.
Mm-hmm.
If not, you could go with a farmed salmon variety. Look, I did a little bit of research on this, but it was many years ago. So I looked at here in Australia, we have some farmed salmon down in Tasmania, and after trying to be like a little bit of a journalistic investigator into like the history of these businesses, and because what happens in some of these farming practices is they'll have like infections that happen, and so you can look at the rates of problems that they have in these pens of salmon and stuff like that. And there was a particular brand that I thought stood out at the time, but this is a long time ago, so it may no longer be relevant. But it was Huon, that I thought when I had a look at all of the available products in Australia that were farmed here, that I would have gone with. However, in saying that, like we can get the stuff from New Zealand now, and they are farming salmon in some of the rivers in New Zealand, which I actually really like that conceptually, because it's just this it's this running water aspect to it versus some of the pens that they've got in the ocean and some of the problems that they may have from that. So if you're looking for some like more specifics on the salmon that I'd choose here in Australia, that would be it. But I don't think it's a deal breaker just to get salmon from other varieties either.
Yeah, no, the only reason I actually asked is because it's something I'm not particularly aware of, but I've had a few guys come to me and say, oh, I can't eat this kind of salmon, you need Alaskan salmon. And I'm like, where are you going to find Alaskan salmon, man? Like you can find it in the smoked, but it's super expensive too.
Yeah, there are more companies doing it now. So because we've entered into an era now where you'll see more what are they called? Like more niche or delicatessen style butchers and chains that supply meats and fish are actually acknowledging there is a market for this higher end stuff. So the butcher I went to yesterday, they've really nearly branded across as a carnivore butcher. They're kind of capitalizing on the carnivore movement in a way. And I went and picked up some organ burgers from there. That was super lean. So it's like, I was like, oh, wow. So these guys are kind of like, they've gone for like a real premium, low fat burger, kind of acknowledging that some people want that from a fitness angle.
Where's
with
that?
the organ meats in there. Where is it?
Off air secret.
Yeah, no, I'll give them a shout out. I don't mind. It's Marbled Meats. They're actually online as well. So they've built out their online platform to send out as well. And anyway, so that's just an example of these more kind of niche food products are starting to pop up more and more so. And salmon is as well. So if you look at some of these places, even these butchers that traditionally deal in like whether it's beef and lamb, they're starting to open up and like get these overseas like frozen vacuum sealed wild salmon and things like that as well.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Yeah, because there's not really we're in the north, like Bundoora area. There's not much like that out there. You'd be hard pressed to find it. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
I'm sure they deliver though.
of course. Oh, James will be all over that. That's okay. I was gonna,
Yep.
man, my brain's jumped to something else here, which I hope you don't mind, and then we'll get back onto, if we can get back on track, we'll try. Okay, so obviously we obviously experiment with beef spleen in clients who are iron deficient, ferritin deficient, whatever it may be.
Yep.
Obviously being an area of your expertise with the blood work and managing those kind of issues, etc. What would your thoughts, or what would your, I guess, approach be in managing someone who had suboptimal iron panels, and managing that, but whether that be via supplementation, liver, spleen, beef, just typical beef? What would be your first point of call, and what are your thoughts on like the spleen, the beef liver?
Yeah, so I mean, I see both ways with iron panels and iron sufficiency. So whether we see like an iron deficiency anemia or iron overload, I see both of those all the time, every week. So in the case of a iron deficiency anemia, I think one of the things you have to do is look at the severity of that, straight off the bat, by looking not only at the iron panel itself, but taking a bit of a history, with the client in terms of their dietary history and just what you make of their gut function as well, and using some of the red cell indices that'll generally start to, you'll see dips basically across the board on things like hemoglobin and hematocrit and red cell count and mean cell size with an iron deficiency.
So just to jump in there, if there was an iron deficiency in the specific iron studies, but the hematology was not impacted, would that draw you to believing that there's some kind of issue with anemia, or would that be like, what would that tell you in that absence? Because obviously you see, like, I obviously get some who, it's usually the ones who are very well aware that they are iron deficient, the hematology's fucked. And then when they're not, usually the hematology, it's obviously on the bottom end, towards the bottom end of the range, but still not enough that the doctors notice it anyway.
This is a really good question. And the best way I can describe it is as follows. Your red blood cells have a life cycle of 120 days. Okay. In that 120 days, so to create a red blood cell, it's a couple of weeks. Okay. And the process of creating a red blood cell, we will, take iron, from our stores within the body. And hopefully we've got some iron continually coming in through our diet as well. That's being absorbed, and it's usable to create heme for hemoglobin, which is the protein the compound that carries our oxygen in our red blood cells around the body. Now, your red blood cells, from a nutritional perspective, are a lagging measure of the last 100 to 120 days of your nutritional status. Okay, so what that's telling you is, if you're seeing red cell indices, so the parts of the metrics of the red blood cells, and they all look great, it's telling you for the 120 days prior, on average, the body had enough to do what it needed to do. Okay. Whereas if you look at an iron panel, you're looking at in a more acute setting. Okay. So that may have been fine over the last 4 months, but maybe in the last 4 weeks or something like that, for whatever reason, there's been a complete change in the intake or absorption or retention of iron in the body, and you're seeing a completely different result there on the iron panel. Okay. Now, if you were to then see like what's a clear iron deficiency state in that iron panel from that point forwards, and then look from 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, and it stayed the same, then what's going to happen over time is, as the red blood cells are destroyed and taken out of the body and the new ones come in, this is happening every single day. By 120 days later, you're now going to be looking at the red cells that have been synthesized using the current status. Okay, so by that stage, you're going to start seeing that reflected, those problems reflected in the red cell indices from the now iron deficient state.
Okay.
So, and the way, a good analogy for this, so anyone who sort of knows their blood work, would be to say, we look at glycosylated hemoglobin as a long-term measure of blood glucose regulation. Okay, so if you're looking at HbA1c, the reason you would do that is basically looking at the glycation or the damage to the hemoglobin over time, and that's giving you a bit of an indication about like systemically, chronically elevated glucose leading to that damage. Whereas serum glucose can fluctuate, on the daily, depending on your diet, your sleep, your stress, and things like that as well. So the HbA1c is a lagging measure of your glucose control.
Yeah.
Your red cell indices, from a nutritional angle, because there's so many other reasons why they can be influenced as well, inflammation, other diseases and disorders and things like that. But from a nutritional perspective, they're reflective of your nutritional intake, absorption, retention, and overall supply to meet the demand needed for that 120 days prior.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, because obviously you get a mixed pool as well. Go, James.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, as far as obviously low iron, low ferritin, everything of the sort is it's obscenely common. Like, I feel like, especially in general population, like, I obviously only really work with Gen Pop clients, and it tends to be when I do get bloods from them, it's just like their iron's shit. Look, admittedly, most of the time it's girls that are like that. Males are normally pretty good. But in that situation, what is like, I feel like this isn't just to help me, but to help people that are going to listen as well. What would you say would be your staples to sort of fix most of that a lot of the time?
As in, what we back to the initial sort of part of it, I suppose, where we're saying, how would we go? Yeah, we kind of got off onto the physiology bit. So in that scenario, when you see it commonplace, like, again, I think evaluating the severity of it is important, because one of the things, if you have a client who's a patient of a doctor and they go and get that done, the doctor will usually throw an iron infusion on the table in severe cases, right? And people ask me my opinions on it, and I'll sort of say, look, one of the things I'm usually looking at is the red cell indices, for instance. I want to know, I'm like, aside from the acute iron panel, low ferritin, whatever it is, what's it like? And if there's no classical symptoms of anemia and the red cell indices look great as well, I think that affords you, perhaps in a lot of cases, some time to go, well, perhaps you don't need to go in there with an iron infusion, especially if you know that their history of their dietary intake has been horrible. You haven't even given it a chance to see what you could do. Okay. If, on the other hand, the person was brilliant with their iron intake, then you've got to be thinking about, is there still a valid reason to go down this infusion path? I don't think you should wipe it off just because you're not a doctor and you're not in the medical field. You should definitely know when to know. That's probably a really good idea to do. So with a lot of the females, what you would be considering is with iron status and things, it's like, well, and your blood indices, we're going to look at, production, destruction, and loss. Okay. And so those are the three things that you'd be looking at. Do we have a problem with the production side of things because of an iron deficiency anemia? Do we have like a heavy flow period or some other reason why we've got this loss happening? Or is there destruction and hemolysis of the red blood cells, which is leading to this issue as well? Yeah, so once you've established, like, where does this fit? Is it a nutritional intervention that's called for, pretty much by itself? And then I'd be looking at suitable high iron foods that would go in. I would love it if I had an accompanying copper status to go along with that iron status. And the reason is there's a copper-containing protein called ceruloplasmin, which is very important for basically getting the iron in the form that it needs to be from the enterocytes, so from the small intestines, into circulation, so that it can be plonked into transferrin, that chaperone protein, and then traveled or transported around the body, I should say, to where it needs to go. So in the absence of knowing someone's copper, you wouldn't go too crazy because you wouldn't want to overload someone with copper. That's not a great idea. But you could choose to use foods where you go, look, I'm going to acknowledge the fact that we've got these red meats and some of these offal meats that you mentioned, and some spleen, and maybe as a supplement, because I don't know too many people that are actually eating spleen coming in there. And the liver's also going to be, if the liver's beef liver or lamb liver, it's also going to be contributing some copper at the same time, but without knowing the copper status and trying not to go too crazy. You just look at the portions that you're using and go from there. Heme is great. I made a post not too long ago just saying, look, when you're buying liver capsules, people buy liver capsules thinking that they're getting really big doses of iron and copper. And I say, you're actually probably not getting as high as you think you are, just based on the fact that they're tiny little 500 milligram size capsules.
Yeah, I've noticed that. That's actually one of the reasons why I asked, because the dosing is quite low.
The dosing is quite low. So I've emailed a few of these companies and kind of gone, oh, okay, so it's not actually a huge amount of iron that I'm getting, even if I'm popping 4 of these capsules or 6 of these capsules. They do start to add up. There are companies now that are doing them probably at 50% of the price that they were from some of these more premium companies a couple of years ago, when the marketplace wasn't as flooded with encapsulated organ products. but it still can add up in terms of an inconvenience, when you're having to have so many capsules, right? Spleen is one of the ones which I think is an exception to this, because spleen is 10 times the iron content of like these other meats. And so it actually doesn't take that many capsules to get a really decent amount of iron coming in from spleen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I'm typically quite fond of the spleen supplementation. But one of the main reasons I asked actually is because the improvements that I see in lab work is still not substantial.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's questionable as well, because you wonder what the consistency around them is. Because when you give someone a spleen supplement, they don't love it. No one loves it.
Yeah.
Obviously, my partner's done the spleen, and it actually worked quite well for her.
Yeah.
I know that she did not miss a day.
Yeah, I've experimented with some spleen supplements and things like that, and I would sort of have to agree with you that I think that it's not necessarily the quickest way from point A to point B in terms of repletion, unless you're really going to get those dosages up there. There is a supplement that I've been using a little bit more so recently by Life Extension, which is an iron protein succinylate, which is quite a great form of iron that's very low in the constipation side effect as well. And I think it's about, I can't remember the exact milligrams of iron in it per capsule, but it's not as high as some of them that you can get. Like some of these iron capsules that you can get, they're getting to around the 60 to 80 to 100 milligram mark.
Yeah.
But I also don't think that that's like that brute force amount of iron is necessarily a great thing to be doing ongoing as well. I prefer to get enough in there in what I would call a moderate repletion amount, which is going to be above someone's recommended daily intake. RDIs aren't designed to replete you. They're designed to try and help you not get into a deficiency. Once you're in a deficient state, you're starting from way behind the mark. You need to go over these adequate intakes or recommended daily intakes to try and resolve that issue, right?
Yeah. One of the concepts that I've carried over from you is I feel like the iron content in cereals and things like that, you don't ever really paid attention. Like no one pays attention really. And then you got like enhanced bodybuilders, hypothetically, who are on copious amounts of calories, obviously already having hematology issues, potentially blood iron issues. Obviously, I don't know if you remember, but I have the genetic blood iron issue as well, the hemochromatosis. So I think that's why that came to our attention and we discussed it. But then as a result, some of them would be eating 150 grams of cereal a day.
The old wheat
Iron overload risk is huge, but no one talks about that because it's like, oh, more iron's better somehow.
It's like, isn't rice flour as well super high in iron? Is that right?
Depends where you get it from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It might be the brand. It might be the brand in the US, the Uncle Ben's one. I'm pretty sure
that would be. They fortify.
Yeah,
I think I found a winner on iron the other day too, guys. Like, so I had to put Milo into our. Is Milo a global brand or is that like an Australian thing?
I don't know. I think it's Australian.
I actually don't
global
know
now.
Right? But I had to put it into our nutrition database because it wasn't in there, and I had a client who said, "Hey, can I do Milo?" And I'm like, "Of course you can." And so I was putting in the data. It's 18 milligrams of iron per 100 grams. So whereas the fortified cereals that we're talking about now, they still get up there in the iron content. When you consider like 100 grams of beef, you're going to get like 2 milligrams of iron. 100 grams of Fruit Loops, you're going to get like 10 milligrams of iron. It's like literally 5 times the iron content of red meat. So this is like where it's can get. People really would have no comprehension at times of the amount of fortified iron that they're getting into their diet. I've said the same thing about like synthetic folate, which is folic acid. We have a lot of fortification of different nutrients in certain commercialized brands. And for people that are like massive cereal consumers, I jokingly say that it's like, I think most of their micronutrients are coming from this cereal, but I don't necessarily think that they were ever designed to be eaten in the, well, they probably were, let's face it. Food companies are very sneaky guys, but the amount, like you look at their portion size, which a lot of these micronutrients are then sort of fortified to meet a certain portion being eaten. You're talking about like a 35 gram serving size that's no one has ever eaten in the history of cereals,
unless you're in prep.
I was about to say, unless you're in prep.
So, but I think there are problems because you do have these bodybuilders and you take anabolic steroids, for instance, and you have an upregulation of iron status because that's going to interrupt the similar to hemochromatosis, which affects the hepcidin compound, which sort of inhibits iron from being absorbed. So it sort of gets trapped in the enterocytes, if you like, and then sloughed off into your stools. That's how we manage iron. Okay, that's how we're supposed to manage iron. When we have hemochromatosis, we have a problem with that happening, which is how we end up with this inability to stop iron from coming in. When you take things like an anabolic steroid, it additionally will have a similar effect to that, and we can end up with, and we also have an upregulated demand for that because we're creating more red blood cells and things as well. So we need more hemoglobin, more heme, thus we need the higher iron intake. But, you know, additionally, one of the things that I don't like with this potentially sort of overconsumption of fortified iron foods in these non-heme forms is, you know, too much iron in the gut is not necessarily a great thing that you want down there for the microbiomes. Okay, so like the bacteria flourish off iron, and we know this in the case of infections, is that your body has very tight control mechanisms in place around iron when you get an infection to deliberately starve that infection of iron. Okay, which is why you'll see a complete change to an iron panel in someone who's got an infection or an inflamed state. And that's that body securing that iron and locking it away so that our immune system can try and get this thing under control. And so if you're putting all this non-heme iron down into the system there, you know, you could potentially be like sort of like it could be acting as a fertilizer to some microbes that perhaps we don't want that kind of situation to be around for.
That's an interesting one. You won't hear about that.
No way.
Yeah. And you go.
You sure? Nah,
Yeah.
just to stem off that as well with the iron. Another really common one that I do see is normal iron panels, but then low ferritin. Yeah. What do you think the main root cause for that most of the time is? Yeah.
I think you have to sort of take into account sometimes that ferritin is like an intracellular, so within cell. Okay, if you imagine our cells kind of like balls or spheres, just for simplicity's sake for a second, the ferritin should be inside there holding like thousands of molecules of iron, if you like. And so when we measure the blood, we're not measuring with your blood test, sorry, we're not measuring things inside the cells. Okay, we're not measuring red blood cell content of ferritin. We're measuring like what's outside the cells. And so I think over time, you know, with our reference ranges that we use for you know, bloods in general, they're really reflecting like the average of the patients that are going and getting these bloods done. And as we know, like the average person getting these bloods done over time is probably not getting healthier. If you look at just general health and where it's going, those ranges are getting wider, or they're getting what we would call far and far from where they were when you could say the populations were probably healthier. And so I think that this could be playing a bit of a part in terms of our expectations of ferritin. Like if ferritin's inside the cell where it kind of needs and should be, then you know, it may not be always like what you see as what you think is low is a reflection of like a true problem, you know? And that's why I think it's important to like acknowledge it, look at the rest of the iron panel, which is kind of giving you, so if we have a true iron anemia state, then what the body will do is the liver will get signals to start making more transferrin. Okay, so it'll sense, hey, we have a very low iron state. We need to make more transferrin here, so this transferrin can go around, dock and pick up this iron and then take it to where it needs to go. So you'll see transferrin start to head up into past the 3s and higher. And usually alongside that, in a nice sort of clinical picture, you would see the saturation, the transferrin saturation decrease. So the transferrin will go up, and concurrently the saturation, which is just a reflection or a percentage of iron containing transferrin. Okay, so it's like how much of the transferrin, the proteins that transport, actually have iron in them. In a deficiency state, you'd see lots of the transporters, not many of them have anything in it, so low saturation. So if you're not seeing that, if you're seeing what looks like a really great transferrin and a really great saturation, but ferritin is on the lower side of normal, and your red cell indices, which is that lagging measure of a reflection of the last 120 days of nutrient status, all look great. I mean, are there a lot of symptoms here that perhaps, you know, are adding to this conversation? And if there weren't, I'd just be tempted to sort of say, okay, let's acknowledge and monitor.
Yeah, I just sort of not intervene, but Do you ever see a high transfer and saturation individuals with the ferritin, transfer, and iron all in normal, what you consider normal range?
Yes.
So something I've seen
Yeah.
pop up on labs that's actually something I've never actually understood.
Yeah, I think there's all, like, you take hemochromatosis, for instance. Like sometimes you will get like the one that will stick out may be the saturation more so than what you're seeing with the ferritin, and you're not seeing a nice clinical picture with like a really, really low transferrin, because in an iron overload state, obviously everything switches. Okay, so the body will sense iron overload, it'll stop producing transferrin. Every transporter transferrin that it has will be saturated, so you'll see that percentage really high. So I think you can still see that in an iron overload case. It's just sometimes the other metrics that you're looking at don't come to the party with the cleanest clinical picture.
Yeah. No, because it's just it's one that I never really understood as well. One other one I've also observed as well. In a lot of individuals who have used anabolic steroids, when they discontinue, there's a skewing of both the iron and the transfer and saturation. And that's another one which I've always been like, I don't know what this could cause this, but it's the doctors obviously dismiss it as being benign. But yeah, I don't know if you had any thoughts on that one as well.
What particularly you're saying? Sorry.
So raised iron and raised transfer and saturation in individuals who were using but are no longer, believe it or not. And I've seen that at least 5 times.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I probably need a little bit more context. I suppose,
I know. I'm even trying to recall it in my head, and I can't specifically remember.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, the iron conversation is a huge one. Yeah, because I get a lot of people consult with me, and they do have, as you just mentioned, like a little bit low ferritin. Everything else looks quite normal, not symptomatic, but they're still being pushed for transfusions, and they're still being pushed to be told to take the supplementation. And they do take the supplementation because they think they need to. The shit turns black. They can't go to the toilet. Switch them over to organ-based supplements or organ-based consumption. It takes a certain type of person to eat organs.
Yep.
Yeah. I remember, what did we used to do? The beef mince with the beef liver. I still do that 10-1. Yeah. You can't even taste it.
Yeah. I can always tell when I've got an Instagram inquiry, because like in my health form, like it'll say, "Oh, what foods do you not like?" And it'll be like the ones that I post a lot of that people hate. So it'll be like, "Oh, I don't eat sardines or beef liver." And I'm like, "No, you obviously have watched my Instagram before, because I post way too much of that."
Still can't do sardines.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got your little one eating sardines.
Yeah, I get my kids eating them. They go on and off though. Neither of them are eating sardines at the moment. But I just play. Parenting's just a forever dynamic process, and for me, it's a little bit of experimentation with a lot of things that when it comes to nutrition and their behavior and stuff like that. So you take your wins where you can, and you move on.
One question I did have here for you as well, like obviously, because we're talking about all the health stuff. You're also a bodybuilding coach and a bodybuilder yourself. How, in clients specifically, how do you manage? Because obviously, when you have competitors, they are going to see skewing of the blood panels. How do you manage sort of balancing act between acceptable blood panels, competitive bodybuilder, and what are some things that you commonly see arise as like significant issues?
Yeah.
Bit of a broad question, I know.
Yeah. Like I think that question really is probably best addressed by saying that I think what's really important is to talk about every individual's tolerance and acceptance of risk. So that's I, as a coach, and as someone who is no longer solely focused like in that the bodybuilding world as such. I have very few competitors anymore. Not that I don't think I was there's the majority of my list anyway. Let's face it, like most of the people that come and work with me are either coaches or people with sort of chronic health conditions, and there might be a fitness component in there as well. But because of that, because of my bias towards health, just generally speaking, I probably have a harder stance and a lower risk tolerance, expectation for clients than some other people would accept. And I've had clients leave me for that. I've had plenty of guys who've like said, "Oh, I want to do more." I'm like, "Cool, go do more." I'm fine with it. So like you came to me, and I guess that's what you're trying to figure out in a working relationship is like wanting to get some advice and get some mentoring and tutelage around it, and so that we can make the best decisions moving forwards. But at any point within that journey, like, you're going to perhaps realize that, like, what I find acceptable as a coach and what an athlete finds acceptable in their journey to where they want to get to just may be completely different.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think that conversation has to get on the table about, like, what is, your expectations around risk and competing and things, because, like, competing and health are not something that run in the same direction.
Mm-hmm.
They're not. Like, none of us are competing as a health endeavor. It's
Mm-hmm.
not a health endeavor. You know what I mean?
It seems like it to the average Joe who has no idea. But
Yes.
once you get anyone who's involved in the space knows it's definitely not healthy. There's I've had a couple of competitors, one more recently as well, who quite early in the prep, the panels were pretty far off where I would like them. And I said, all right, this is what they're looking like right now. It's not so much a concern, but, like, to think of that we have to push towards the end, obviously still 18 weeks out. It's like, if they got any worse than this, I'm not comfortable here.
Yeah.
So obviously now we're sort of put a few implementations in place to sort of hope that they tidy up across the next 4 weeks. And then if that's good, then it doesn't become a conversation where I make that decision. That's a conversation where I say, this is my observation. What do you want to do? And that's when. But at the same time, you can obviously, I guess, pull the foot off the gas if you need to a little bit. At the end of the day, to make up a few percentage different, you're not going to take risks you don't need to.
I think those conversations are, like, all got to be had, between a coach and a client. And then you just got to sort of, like, understand that you want people making informed decisions, and they're adult decisions, not coaching children. At the end of the day, like, we just need people that need to have personal responsibility. You can't, and I get this, still, I don't know if you do still, but people say, hey, I want to come and do steroids safely. And I'm just like, okay, what are you talking about? So what do you mean by that? But yeah, I think just you're right. Like, I suppose getting a starting point is essential, to knowing where you're going to go from there. Like, how do you qualify in terms of your health already? And this doesn't even have to be a topic on steroids. This is a topic on competing in general. You completely in the natural divisions. It's super important to be looking at a client's health and then helping them understand that if their health is, like, in no place to be, like, launching a contest preparation on, which is a challenge physically and psychologically to a client, then you've just got to have that discussion with them saying it's not feasible from where you are right now. Like, you shouldn't do it. This shouldn't be just a flippant goal that people try to pursue as, like, I want to conquer this. There's plenty of other things that people could conquer, so I'm probably getting old as well. I get a bit grumpy and that with these kind of things, but I just try to talk people out of things where I can see that you've never even been to a bodybuilding show.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So don't tell me that, like, it's like this dream and stuff like that. I'm like, go down there, go backstage, see how brain dead everyone is. See what it's like when you have, like, a 30-girl lineup and, like, 25 girls are up there for 5 minutes, and then after 24 weeks of hard work and a couple of photos, they're done. And you see the ones who love the process, and you see the ones that hated the process the whole way and were doing it for very wrong reasons, and don't have a great time post-comp.
Yeah, because I always say you need to obviously you always need to establish your why, and if the reason's not great enough, they don't make it. I was going to say as well, when someone's in a suboptimal position to start the prep, I've started people in suboptimal positions to start the prep because they're intent on doing the prep. They never make it. Yeah, I haven't seen any who I've never seen any make it who I'm, like, fighting against. Do you get what I mean by that? Yeah, it's either, like, they mentally break down or physically they can't come together. Like, I've had individuals who have been dieting for, like, a year and a half straight with, like, short breaks at maintenance, and they think that's like a surplus, and then they want to do a prep, and it's like, fuck, man, like, we got nowhere. We got no room to move here.
Unfortunately, I feel like, well, in my experience, like, most of the people that have that kind of outlook or that perspective on what's going on are also, like, they're the amateurs, what I mean, that have short-term gratification. It's just, they're not process loving. It has to be that show. Like, why does it have to be that show? Why can't you put in the best performance, at a later show? Like, why does it have to be the show? And it's usually because it's, I'm motivated now. To do it. And I don't know if I'll be motivated later. It's like, oh, this probably isn't the sport for you then.
Yeah, no.
So
Yeah, once you flick towards the end, it's not the motivation doesn't even get you there. It's just it's a routine. Yeah, which draws us back to our initial conversation as well. Yeah. Yeah, as well, while we're on that as well, like with in competitive bodybuilders, as let's say we're talking about the enhanced pool, who will see like the hematocrit and the hemoglobins come up. Do you feel like bloodletting is a sustainable tool to manage those kind of values?
not sustainable for very long.
Yeah.
Like you can bring it down acutely, but you're not removing the reasons, I suppose, for those elevations. So I think that's just a question of contextually how long does sustaining mean? So yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit of a tough question. The only reason I asked you that actually is because everyone shares. I've noticed a lot of people share different views. But the ulterior sort of incorporation these days is the ARB telmisartan use, and some individuals just can't do telmisartan.
Yeah.
So it becomes a little bit of you have to donate, and then no one likes bloodletting, but strangely enough, I like bloodletting. I reckon it's relaxing.
Yeah, I mean,
you just like the cookie afterwards, man.
Yeah, I do like the cookies afterwards. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a little bit of a different conversation around the red blood cells, but the iron overload cases and actually giving blood is a great solution.
Yeah, so I have to look for that.
Yeah, on that front, that is like literally the best way to get your iron down is go get blood. And so I think that is anyone with hemochromatosis and these issues will kind of know to some degree. You might have a bit of a schedule that works on that. Maybe you have some supplements in there as well that are working as well. You could be using some quercetin and IP6 and curcumin and even caffeine to a degree that can kind of like inhibit this iron absorption and affect this hepcidin expression and alter the iron transporters into the gut and stuff like that as well. But part of it, more often than not, is just simple giving blood, and people that have iron overload that give blood, you generally don't feel too great in the first 24 hours, but the days after that, it can be really quite a good experience for a lot of people that have got too much iron, because it's that iron burden is it's an oxidative burden, from a pressure on the body that has to deal with the antioxidant defense system. It can lead to a lot of the symptoms of fatigue and cognitive issues and stuff like that. So
yeah, no, because I actually find that once I donate, I feel super relaxed for 24 hours.
Yeah,
and then after that, it's sort of I feel good again. But I have noticed since because I donated for the first time, you were the one that encouraged me to do so, because I did have the elevation in ferritin. They didn't qualify. I was lucky they didn't qualify me as having hemochromatosis because the values weren't high enough. So they need to be closer to 1,000 from memory. And I was I think the highest I got actually was when we first discovered that was about 770.
Yeah.
And then now, they sit around 2 to 3 now. I've got it down to 150 before, but I don't know. And funnily enough, like diet manipulation does nothing for it. Like it just keeps climbing. Yeah. But then again, to be fair with you, the indirect sources might get me. Like, for example, James saying cream of rice would have the iron in it. I wouldn't have known that. Well, I would have, but I assume when you buy a no-name product off the shelf, it's just rice flour. You're not putting something else in it. Yeah. You touched on before as well, like obviously, and I've seen this on your story, and I did want to bring this up too. It's like superdosing supplements or RDIs and things like that, in order to bring, to normalize skewings that you may observe. Might be another very vague question, but how would you know the extent to which to sort of go about this in certain cases, if you want to draw specific examples or anything like that? And sorry to really pick your brain on these ones, but
did I do something recently? I'm trying to remember. I think I did. I'm just trying to remember. Was there a nutrient that I was talking about?
I'm about to check.
Oh, you don't have to check.
I may as well.
Look, I think maybe magnesium. You know what I mean? So
yes, it was.
Yes, I was looking at your highlights the other day. Actually, I think.
Yeah, I can't even remember the context of what I did. There you go. But yeah, so like if we're dealing with like a magnesium deficient state, for instance, and our RDI might be sitting at somewhere between 400 and 500 milligrams per day, then in all likelihood, I don't know very many people that are active and have already got themselves in a position of magnesium deficiency that are going to correct that with anything close to the recommended daily intake. Okay.
Yeah.
So then what I suggest people do, if you're going to go get some guidance and, like someone to help you with this, that's great. They can do it for you. But if you're left up to your own devices and want to do a bit of research, then you can go to some kind of resource that allows you to look at the reasons for the recommended daily intakes or the adequate intakes, and also might expose you to the upper limits, the ULs of different nutrients as well. Now, these are set for different reasons on things. So like the magnesium one here in Australia, for instance, is set on based on supplement rather than food sourced magnesium intake, and based on diarrhea being the outcome to kind of stay away from. So I'm like, okay, well, that's a symptom that can be a little bit severe in some, but it's not exactly the craziest thing that could happen to you if you happen to go over a little bit over, right? And most of us have done that at some stage with magnesium. So to use a specific example with what I may do is I would often use the sprouted chickpea loaf, the Basan bread chickpea is very high in magnesium. So if you can find a chickpea loaf, a sprouted loaf, they are extremely high in magnesium. I've never seen anything like it. 100 grams worth of bread, and you can get 660 milligrams of magnesium. Okay. So I would often say to make this really simple for a client, I might say, okay, I need you to go through 1.5 loaves of this per week. You know what I mean? And that's going to give us, it might give us anywhere between the realm of 800 to 1,000 milligrams of magnesium per day, per serve. Now, just to clarify this, because most people's experience with magnesium will be through like a magnesium powder, and plenty of people have got an experience which is put them on the toilet. So I need to clarify this. When you take magnesium in a supplement form, it's often bound to something, and it's a very high concentration for the powder that's going in. And what will happen when you put that into the gut is it will form an osmotic gradient. So there's a very big difference between what's on the inside of the gut versus what's on the inside of the body. And one of the things that the body will do in these situations is it'll try to equalize that. And in the process of doing so, it can pull a lot of water into the bowels to try and fix that gradient. And that sets off a bit of a cascade of things that happen in the GI to give you diarrhea, to give you loose bowels. Okay. You don't see that problem with magnesium in a food complex. So in food, magnesium is bound to different things and stuff like that. Like in green vegetables, for instance, it's like within the chlorophyll, you know what I mean? That's where you're getting the magnesium. So you can go these higher doses. And then people ask me, because I want to go, oh, does that improve blood work? And I'm like, yes, it does. So I've seen it. You just have to rely upon my anecdotal clinical evidence here, in that a lot of the time I've corrected these magnesium deficiencies without using a magnesium supplement. There are cases when I do both. When I'm dealing with someone who's a larger individual who has an extreme exercise stimulus and a high workload in general, perhaps, and also perhaps is dealing with summer with a hot temperature. I'm like, okay, cool. There's like a multitude of factors here which are going to influence the requirement for this person's magnesium. And so I have no qualms also integrating a magnesium supplement in addition to the food if it's needed as well.
Okay. Would you ever utilize a magnesium supplement to promote bowel movements on that as well?
You can do. It's not the nicest way to do it, because of that thing. So back when I had the supplement stores, for instance, there was a product called Colon Cleanse, and there's the magnesium oxides. So the cheapest magnesiums, the highest percentage magnesium in it, and you would just take like a 2-gram serving of this, and it would tend to put you on the toilet most of the time. So I think you can do it, and in cases where it's essential, like it's definitely on your list of things. It's like a non-medical, it's just an over-the-counter supplement that you can access very quickly and get the job done.
Yeah, no, because I've done this magnesium citrate with meals across the day to sort of induce that bowel movement in individuals who really struggle. Does work, but the sprouted loaf is one which we really took on board in terms of application. I do notice I think we even observed this when we worked together, a little bit of an inverse reaction in some individuals when the magnesium dose or intake goes from like close to 0 to like 1,000 milligrams per day. Have you observed that as well in terms of a stress response?
A stress response?
Not so much a stress response, but yeah, I guess a stress response.
What do you mean by that? Like what sort of symptoms or?
Probably more just like a little bit of just anxiety, sort of tense kind of nature, impacts on. I've seen impacts on libido, things like that.
Yeah,
It's
okay.
more, and it's very anecdotal, but it's something that I've observed and also done some, not research, because I don't think there's anything documented, but if you find anecdotal research, if you want to
Yeah.
call it that.
I can't say I've kind of seen anything like
Yeah.
that with the bread as such.
Yeah. Because a lot of people, when you give them the bread, you tell them buy this bread and they taste it and then they love it and then they keep eating it. Yeah. And they probably end up at 2,500, 3,000. Alex Stevenson,
Yeah.
when he first discovered it, he was having like a loaf a day.
Yeah, I've done that heaps of times.
Yeah, I have as well. But
yeah.
That's why I joke about it. I'm like, I could have a loaf a day. It doesn't really change my bowel movements or anything like that. It's an easy bread to eat. It's definitely like a toast bread to me. Like it's too hard to have as fresh bread.
Fresh. I actually remember the first time you gave it to me. I had it fresh, and I remember thinking, "Fuck! Everyone told me this is good. Like I don't like it." And then you toast it the next day, and I'm like, "Okay, this makes sense."
Yeah.
The other one was I still buy the other one. What is the chicken liver pate with the bacon in it? Yeah, that one's nice as well. Typically goes off because I don't have it enough. You get a little bit over it, but yeah. But the sprouted loaf, those two have definitely lingered on for a very, very long time. Yeah.
I think look, that sort of like makes a good example, I suppose, of like looking at a nutritional deficiency from a meal setup angle first and foremost, and then looking at like what kind of accompanying supplement solution would you do if warranted as well. Zinc is one actually that's probably a little bit more along the lines of supplemental for most people in my experience. Oysters are an amazing source of zinc, but again, like what's everyone's palatability like around oysters, plus their from a behavioral perspective, like who's going to keep that up if it's a case of like going somewhere to get fresh oysters that's outside of somewhere that they would normally go as well. So I'm a huge oyster fan, but I think when it comes to a feasibility assessment with clients about the regularity of consumption to correct a zinc deficiency, for instance, it's in my experience, and I think I see it a lot. I don't really have individuals that are committed to that, so I don't usually use that as a setup that's going to solve the problem. I use it as something I'm going, hey, when we spot those opportunities, can we take them? And it's like, yes, there's not a lot of pressure on it to be the thing that actually resolves it. It's just an understanding that like, hey, when you see opportunities like this, take them.
Yeah.
Because go on.
No, sorry. I was going to say, as far as nutrient density goes, for someone who can't get the ease of access out to get fresh oysters, is there much of a difference from the canned to the fresh?
To my understanding, not really. I think I've only given this a cursory look a few years ago, actually, when I had one of my girls who was in country, like far inland, so no access to any kind of seafood place, really. I don't think where she was. And I think I remember giving it a bit of a look then and just being fairly content, going, you know what? She had no problem eating them. So this was like a bit of an outlier to what we just said. So she would just eat canned oysters. And I didn't really foresee a problem with it, no.
Good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as I was going to add before as well. So in regards to zinc, do you observe zinc overload very often? And what kind of issues would we see here?
So strangely enough, I don't actually see a lot of zinc overload as reflected in the zinc status of the individual. The thing that I've been vocal about on platforms is to say zinc is something that comes in a very high dose, okay, in supplements. It's very common to see a 30 milligram dose of zinc or a 50 milligram dose of zinc. And I am a huge advocate of zinc. And I think that a lot of bodybuilding and fitness people in general would probably benefit through a lot of phases of their training with some kind of supporting zinc that is beyond the RDIs. I don't think the RDIs are really suitable for someone trying to grow muscle. You need a lot of zinc to create muscle mass. But what may be something that's kind of not so obvious as that status of zinc is whether or not it's influencing your copper status, okay? Because zinc and copper basically use the same, like they're called metalloenzymes, kind of like these enzymes that hold the minerals in the cells of the gut, and the zinc upregulates it a lot, but the enzyme has a higher affinity, so it actually is more attracted to copper. And so what happens is you're taking all this zinc, you get an expression of all of this metalloenzymes, and the zinc goes in fine, that's okay. But the one that copped it was the copper. And so you can give yourself a copper deficiency, because then that'll be sloughed off as your cells of the gut turn over and you have your bowel movements. And you can, high dose zinc is a good way to give yourself a copper deficiency. And so it's what I would say is like, look, do your due diligence. If you're going to use high dose zinc, I've got no problem with it. Have an understanding where your zinc and copper statuses are in the first place. You know, that'll give you a bit of an idea. So if I see someone with both a zinc and a copper insufficiency, I'll be like, sweet, there are products out there that are literally like 20 milligrams of zinc and 2 milligrams of copper. That could be a really good solution for that person to help them achieve both. If someone had extremely high copper, great. We just looked at one of the benefits that you can use zinc for is to help bring that copper down. So you wouldn't be getting a blended product for that, obviously, would you? Okay, you would be going with that. And we talk about beef liver just before. You know, beef liver, lamb liver, these are really great, high nutrient dense foods, but 14 milligrams of copper per 100 grams of the product. And if you're dealing with someone with a copper toxicity or copper overload and an insufficient zinc, then you don't want to marry up this zinc supplementation with also at the same time a large doses of liver providing the copper, because you're actually trying to go in there and bring the copper down. So I don't really see the futility in kind of keeping really high copper foods in there whilst you're going in there with something from a supplement angle to look at the situation.
Yeah, because I know that Jarrows do the zinc copper supplement as well.
Yeah,
I've always leaned towards the 15 milligrams in the zinc picolinate by Thorne, typically, but it's it's also hard to sometimes draw those panels in the copper, zinc, etc., because the doctors typically don't love doing it, and then you have to pay for them. But when you pay for them through iMedical, for example, it is more expensive again. For a panel which 4 and 5 times is pretty reasonable.
Yeah.
So sometimes you don't want to press people into spending. For me, anyway, I try to just get people to draw the labs which I've seen historically have been troublesome. First time I'd say I want everything, and then obviously over time you'd sprinkle one in, but especially because I got a few guys that do labs like every 10 weeks. I got one guy that does them every 4.
Yeah,
he doesn't pay for them.
Exactly, because this is the conversation that I have a lot. You know, I'm very wary about trying not to overspend people's money. You know, and that's why I was just saying,
I think that's where I got it from. I'm the exact same. Yeah.
And so like people will sort of say, hey, what should I get done? And I'm like, look, there is probably a good chance we're not going to get my complete wish list done at any given point in time, especially when we're first starting off together and having to approach a physician to kind of see what we can do. I kind of like help coach them in the sense of like what to say to the physician so that they've actually got a reason to write in the little box as to why or why not we can run these extra tests, because that's part of that model is to give them a reason, you know, because they're encountering so many patients a day who may be asking for all types of random things, and perhaps with not some great valid reasons behind why they're doing it. We would like to think our reasons are better than some of those, but yeah, I think at the end of the day, you get done what you can get done, and as you said, like maybe over time you get to like sprinkle it a little bit more and go, hey, it's 6 months later, I think we should check on that copper status. We never did it at the start. Like maybe you come back around and circle into it and sort of spread it over. I really think it comes down to the context again. So if you're someone who's like wanting to use like high dose zincs all the time for something, then that's sort of creating a situation where you should do a bit more due diligence with the copper. You know, I sort of say the same thing. I'm a huge fan of the omega-3 index. You know, it's a blood prick test that you can do at home, but it does cost $120 or something like that for the complete test. And so I'm aware of that, but I think, you know, when I look at the research, I'm so impressed by, and a high omega-3 status across multiple areas of health, that I think if I'm dealing with someone who just doesn't historically have a great fish intake and you're working with them and suspicious, that I'm like, hey, even just as a once-off, I think it might be worthwhile actually seeing where you land on this, because it's, you know, in my opinion, it's better to be on the higher side than the lower side of an omega-3 index. And you're just someone who doesn't enjoy eating your fish. And, you know, are we going, you know, if you're going to invest in utilizing fish oil supplements for a decent amount of time because you're not a huge consumer of fish from a dietary perspective, then perhaps you'd like to know like what your efforts are like getting you to. Because as much as we can make generalized recommendations and advice around the intake, there are individual responses to these things. And I've said it, you know, I had a great client who loves sardines, swore that he ate them just as much as me, because we would like go back and forth on Instagram stories whenever we'd post them up, and we'd send videos of each other like clearing the whole thing into the trolley as a joke and stuff like that. And then I got his omega-3 index back, and it was like 5. Where 8% plus is optimal. Mine sits at 13%, and I don't supplement with fish oil, but I eat a lot of fatty fish, right?
Yeah.
And his was 5%, and it blew my mind. But then I had to take into account some things, and this isn't in the literature. Well, not really as such, but he covered head to toes in tattoos. You know what I mean? Which has a certain burden on the body, and our omega-3s are very important for regulating the like inflammation, our response to infection, and things like that. And he also had a few health things going on that were probably like some skin stuff and everything that would have had some accompanying inflammation as well, and these were chronic. And so I think, well, over time, like, is his intake, is the demand actually outweighing the supply here? Because the supply is huge. He's got a great dietary intake here, but we're just not seeing it reflected in the status. And is that status just being drained by a need, an upregulated demand for the body trying to resolve this inflammation from some of the things that he had going on? That's my guesswork. And it meant that we had to go in there and actually go in with some supplementation and get his intake far beyond what we thought we might have had to do to get his status up into a realm that we wanted it.
Yeah, no, I'm not super familiar with the omega-3 status, like the index test. But interestingly enough, yeah, you touched those concepts, especially the tattoo one. People would never think that would have any impact on from panels. Obviously, it's a theory.
Yeah, it is. It's based off of a few things, like like mechanistically, we kind of know how things work, which is great. And then when we look at, so if you look at lupus, okay, so lupus, which is a inflammatory condition, and when they've run the omega-3 index on patients with lupus, they've seen, when you cross out all the other factors, across the board, a much lower omega-3 status in patients with lupus. Yeah. And that's something where you can sort of like think about that and hypothesize and say, well, is it because, the body isn't in a chronic constant state of inflammation and trying to resolve something successfully or unsuccessfully, and in the process is upregulating that demand for those nutrients?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. All right, we might have to wrap it up there, man, but there's heaps we didn't get through. Yeah, heaps. But no, we appreciate your time, man. Thank you very much.
Oh, boys, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it as well.
Man. I looked back down at the time about 10 minutes ago. I'm like, fucking hell.
Yeah.
It's nice to chat to you again. It's nice to chat to you as well.
You too, guys. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. Man.